The iron collar bit into Zara's neck as she stumbled through the mountain pass, her bare feet bleeding on the sharp rocks while the slaver's wagon creaked somewhere behind her in the darkness. She had maybe an hour before dawn, maybe less, and the thin cotton shift they had given her did nothing against the biting wind that screamed down from the peaks. Her green skin had gone pale with cold, her tusks chattering so hard she feared they might crack, and every breath felt like swallowing glass. Freedom, she had discovered in the 3 days since she had killed her owner and fled into the wilderness, was just another word for dying slowly instead of quickly. The cave mouth appeared like a blessing from whatever god still listened to orcs, a dark slash in the mountainside that promised shelter from the wind. Zara did not care if a bear lived inside, did not care if the whole mountain came down on her head. She crawled inside on hands and knees, her muscles screaming, and collapsed on the stone floor. Sleep took her before she could even feel grateful. She woke to warmth and the smell of wood smoke. Her eyes snapped open and she tried to leap up, but her body refused to cooperate, every muscle locked in protest. A fire crackled a few feet away, built expertly in a ring of stones, and beyond it sat a man. He was human, broad-shouldered and lean, with dark hair that fell past his collar and a beard that suggested he had been living rough for some time. His hands, visible in the firelight as he tended a small pot over the flames, were scarred and calloused. He wore simple traveling clothes, patched in places, and a heavy cloak that had seen better days. When he noticed she was awake, he did not reach for the sword that lay beside him. "Easy," he said, his voice low and careful. "You have been asleep for 2 days." Zara's hand flew to her throat. The collar was still there, cold and hateful against her skin. She tried to speak and only managed to croak. The man ladled something into a wooden bowl and set it on the ground between them, then retreated back to his side of the fire. "Broth. Nothing fancy, but it will help." She stared at him, then at the bowl, trying to understand the trap. Humans did not help orcs. Humans captured orcs, sold them, worked them until their bodies broke, then tossed the pieces aside. This had to be a trick. "My name is Daniel," the man said, settling back against the cave wall. "Daniel Oakes. I've been living in these mountains for 3 years now. You are safe here." "Safe," Zara rasped, and the word tasted like a lie. "You are human." "I am." He stirred his own bowl, not looking at her directly. "And you are an orc who is wearing a slave collar and running from something bad enough that you would risk the mountain passes in late autumn with no supplies and no shoes. So I figure we both have our reasons for being careful around people." The broth smelled like heaven. Her stomach cramped so hard she nearly whimpered. Pride warred with hunger and hunger won. She grabbed the bowl and drank, burning her tongue, not caring. It was thin and watery, but there were bits of meat in it and herbs and salt. Real food. She had not tasted real food in so long she had almost forgotten what it was like. Daniel said nothing while she ate, just tended the fire and ate his own meal. When she finished, he refilled her bowl without asking. She drank that one too, slower this time, her mind starting to work again now that her body was not screaming quite so loud. "Why?" she finally asked. He glanced at her, his eyes dark and unreadable in the firelight. "Why what? Why help me? You could have turned me in." "Escaped slaves, there is a bounty." "Could have," he agreed. "Did not want to." He set his bowl aside and leaned back, crossing his arms. "You looked like you had been through enough. Figured you deserved a chance to rest before the world came at you again." Zara touched the collar again, hating it, hating how it marked her as property, as less than human, less than anything. "The slavers will be looking for me, probably. But these mountains are big and I know places most folks do not. You can stay until you are strong enough to keep running if that is what you want to do." She studied him, looking for the angle, the trick, the moment when he would reveal what he really wanted. Men always wanted something. Human men especially. But Daniel just looked tired, the kind of bone-deep exhaustion that came from carrying too much for too long. There were scars on his hands, and one that traced along his jaw, half hidden by his beard. A soldier, maybe, or someone who had seen violence up close. "I do not have anything to pay you with," she said carefully. "Good thing I am not asking for payment, then." He stood, stretching, and moved to the cave entrance. Outside, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. "Get some more rest. We can talk about what comes next when you are back on your feet." Zara did not trust him, could not trust him. But she was so tired, and the fire was warm, and her body demanded sleep with an urgency she could not fight. She curled up on her side, keeping him in her peripheral vision, and let her eyes drift closed. If he was going to kill her, at least she would die warm and fed. She woke in the morning to find a pair of boots beside the fire, worn but serviceable, and thick socks that looked hand-knitted. Daniel was outside the cave, doing something she could not quite see. Zara pulled on the socks and boots, marveling at how something so simple could feel like such a luxury. They fit reasonably well, just a little big, which was better than too small. When Daniel came back inside, he was carrying an armful of firewood. "You are up. Good. How are you feeling?" Better, she was. The rest had helped, and the food and the warmth. She still hurt everywhere, and her feet were still healing, but the desperate fog that had clouded her mind for days had lifted. "Thank you. For the boots." "They were my sister's," he said, stacking the wood carefully near the back of the cave. She did not need them anymore. There was a weight to those words, a grief that Zara recognized. She had lost family too. Everyone she had ever known, in fact, when the raiders had swept through her clan's territory 5 years ago. "I am sorry." Daniel nodded once, a short, sharp movement, and changed the subject. "Can you tell me your name, or would you rather not, Zara?" It felt strange to say it out loud. The slavers had not cared about her name, had just called her girl or beast or worse things. "My name is Zara." "Zara." He said it carefully, like he was tasting the shape of it. "That is a good name." Strong. They fell into a routine over the next few days that felt almost normal, which was perhaps the strangest thing of all. Daniel would go out hunting or checking his snares in the early morning, and Zara would tend the fire and try to make herself useful around the cave. He had a surprising amount of supplies cached in the deeper parts of the cave system, blankets and tools and dried goods, like he had been preparing for a long winter alone. He showed her the network of caves, pointing out the fresh water spring in one chamber and the storage areas in another. "I found this place my first winter in the mountains," he explained, his voice echoing off the stone walls. "Figured it was better than building a cabin where anyone could stumble across it." "You are hiding too," Zara said. It was not a question. Daniel's jaw tightened. "Something like that." She did not push. Everyone had secrets, especially people who lived alone in the wilderness. What mattered was that he had kept his word. He did not try to hurt her, did not try to touch her, did not even ask her for her story unless she wanted to share it. He was just there, steady and quiet, offering help without expecting anything in return. It was so foreign to everything she had experienced in the last 5 years that she did not know what to do with it. On the 4th day, she found him outside the cave trying to repair a snare that had been damaged by some animal. His hands were cold and clumsy, and he swore under his breath as the wire slipped from his grip for the 3rd time. "Let me," Zara said, crouching beside him. Daniel looked surprised but handed over the snare. Zara's fingers, stronger and more nimble despite the cold, made quick work of the repair. Her clan had been hunters and trappers before the raids, and some skills you did not forget no matter how long you went without using them. "Where did you learn that?" Daniel asked, watching her work. "My father. He taught me and my brothers how to track and trap before I had seen 8 winters." She finished the repair and tested the tension, nodded in satisfaction. "We lived in the borderlands where the forest meets the plains. Good hunting there before the wars came." "What happened to your family?" Zara stood, brushing dirt from her knees. "Same thing that happens to most orcs who live too close to human territory. Raiders came, my clan fought, we lost." She met his eyes. "I was 15. They took everyone who looked strong enough to work and killed the rest. I have not seen another orc since." Daniel's face went hard. The war was supposed to be over. For humans, maybe. For orcs, the war never ends. She handed him back the snare. "We are always going to be monsters to your people, always going to be something to be used or destroyed." "Not to me," Daniel said quietly. Zara wanted to believe him. The wanting scared her worse than anything else that had happened in the last 5 years. Hope was dangerous. Hope got you hurt. They walked back to the cave in silence, but something had shifted between them. That evening, as they ate dinner by the fire, Daniel started talking. He told her about his sister, Deanne, who had been kind and clever and interested in healing herbs. He told her about the village where he had grown up, about his parents who had died when he was young, about the war that had come and taken everything else. "I was a soldier," he said, staring into the flames. "Fought for the king's army for 6 years. We were told we were protecting the realm, keeping the borders safe. But mostly what we did was burn orc settlements and kill anyone who resisted." His voice went flat. "I was good at it. That is the part that haunts me most. I was good at killing, and I did not question it until it was too late." Zara felt something cold settle in her stomach. "What changed?" "We got orders to clear out a village. Said it was a stronghold for orc raiders, a threat to nearby human settlements. But when we got there, it was just families, farmers, people trying to live their lives." He closed his eyes. "My commander did not care, said orcs were orcs and they would all grow up to be raiders eventually. Deanne, she had come with the supply train, she was working as a healer. She tried to stop it, tried to help the orc children escape." His voice cracked. "They killed her for it. My own unit. Said she was a traitor and they cut her down right there in front of me. I killed 4 of them before the rest of the village burned. Then I ran. I have been running ever since." The silence stretched between them, heavy with old grief and new understanding. Zara reached out slowly, giving him time to pull away, and rested her hand on his arm. "Your sister was brave. She was better than me," Daniel said roughly. "She saw people. I just saw enemies until it was too late." "You see me now," Zara said. "You saw me in the cave, freezing and running. You could have ignored that. You did not." He looked at her then, really looked at her, and something in his expression made her breath catch. "How could I ignore you?" The moment stretched taut between them, charged with something Zara did not want to name. She pulled her hand back, suddenly aware of how close they were sitting, how the firelight painted shadows across Daniel's face and made his eyes look impossibly dark. "I should get more wood," she said abruptly, standing. Daniel caught her wrist, gentle enough that she could pull away if she wanted. "Zara, you do not have to run from me. I am not running. You are, just like I ran." He let go but held her gaze. "But maybe we have both been running long enough." Zara did not know what to say to that, so she went to get the wood anyway. But that night, as she lay by the fire and listened to Daniel's breathing even out into sleep, she let herself think about what it might be like to stop running, to have a place that felt safe, to trust someone again. The thought terrified her. The next week passed in a blur of small domesticity that felt surreal. Daniel taught her how to fish in the mountain streams, standing knee-deep in freezing water and laughing when she nearly fell in trying to catch a particularly large trout. Zara showed him how to make snares more effective, how to read animal tracks and predict their movements. They worked on winterizing the cave, stacking firewood and checking the smoke vents and making sure their water supply would not freeze. It felt like playing house, like pretending they were just two people living a simple life instead of an orc fugitive and a deserter hiding from the world. But Zara found herself falling into the fantasy more easily than she wanted to admit. She liked the rhythm of their days, the easy silence that fell between them when they worked, the way Daniel would smile when she made a joke. She liked how he never treated her like she was less than him, never flinched from her tusks or her green skin, or the way her ears came to points. She liked him, which was a problem because liking led to wanting and wanting led to pain. The collar around her neck was a constant reminder of what she was: a slave, property, something to be owned. Even if Daniel did not see her that way, the rest of the world would. And the collar would not come off. She had tried in private moments, working at the lock with bits of wire and stone. It was well made, designed to thwart escape attempts. She would need proper tools to remove it and probably help, and both of those things required going back to civilization. Going back meant risking recapture. It meant putting Daniel in danger too, if anyone found out he had been harboring an escaped slave. She was thinking about this, sitting outside the cave and watching the sun set over the mountains when Daniel joined her. He had been cleaning fish down by the stream, and he smelled like cold water and iron. "Beautiful, is it not?" he said, settling beside her on the flat rock that had become their informal evening perch. "Yes." Zara pulled her cloak tighter around herself. The cloak was another gift from Daniel, pieced together from his spare clothes and a deer hide he had tanned. It fit her well enough, and it was warm. Everything he gave her was practical, useful, and freely offered. She did not know what to do with that kind of generosity. "Daniel, I need to ask you something." "Ask. Why are you really doing this? And do not tell me you are just being kind. Nobody is just kind, not without a reason." He was quiet for a long moment, his eyes on the horizon. "When Deanne died, I thought I would go mad with it. The guilt, the grief, the anger. I thought about dying, but I was too much of a coward for that, so I ran instead. Came up here thinking I would just disappear, live like a hermit until the world forgot I existed." He glanced at her. "And then you showed up, half dead and desperate, and I realized something." "What?" "That maybe Deanne did not die for nothing if I could do better. Be better. Help someone she would have helped." He smiled, sad and crooked. "You think I am being kind for your sake, Zara, but really I am being selfish. Helping you helps me live with myself." Zara absorbed that, turning it over in her mind. "So I am your redemption project." "No." He said it with such firmness that she blinked. "You are a person who deserves help, and I am someone who can give it. That is all. What you do with that help, where you go from here, that is your choice. I am not trying to save you, I am just trying to give you options. And if I choose to stay." The question hung in the air between them, heavy with implications neither of them was quite ready to speak out loud. Daniel's expression shifted, something vulnerable and hopeful flickering across his face before he locked it down. "Then I would be happy to have the company," he said carefully. "These caves are big enough for two." Zara nodded, not trusting herself to say more. The sun had nearly set now, the last rays of light painting the clouds purple and gold. It was beautiful and harsh and unforgiving, just like the mountains, just like the life they were building here. Just like the way she was starting to feel about the man sitting beside her. That night, she dreamed of fire and chains, of running through endless corridors while something dark and terrible chased her. She woke gasping, her hand at her throat, and found Daniel kneeling beside her with his hand outstretched. "You were screaming," he said softly. "Bad dream," Zara nodded, not trusting her voice. The collar felt like it was choking her, a phantom weight that had nothing to do with the actual iron around her neck and everything to do with the memories she could not escape. "Come here," Daniel said, and opened his arms. She should have refused. Should have pushed him away and rebuilt the walls that were crumbling between them. But she was so tired of being strong, so tired of carrying everything alone. She let him pull her into his embrace, let herself be held while she shook apart. He smelled like wood smoke and leather, and his arms were solid and warm around her. "I've got you," he murmured into her hair. "You are safe. I promise you are safe." Zara did not cry. She had forgotten how, somewhere in the last 5 years. But she clung to him like he was the only solid thing in a world gone liquid and strange, and she let herself believe, just for a moment, that safety was possible. When dawn came, they did not speak of it. But something had changed between them, a wall broken down that could not be rebuilt. They were gentler with each other, more aware. Daniel's hand would linger on hers when he passed her things. Zara would catch herself watching him when he worked, admiring the economical way he moved, the strength in his shoulders. The air between them felt charged, like the moment before a storm breaks. Autumn deepened into early winter. Snow came to the high peaks, dusting the world white, and the temperature dropped until even the cave felt cold despite the fire. They moved their bedrolls closer to the hearth, then closer to each other until they were sleeping side by side for warmth. It was practical, necessary. And if Zara woke sometimes to find Daniel's arm draped over her waist, or if she pressed back against him in the night seeking his heat, well, that was just survival. She told herself it was just survival. The truth crashed over her one morning when she woke to find him still asleep beside her, his face relaxed and younger in the early light. She wanted to touch him, wanted to trace the line of his jaw, smooth the furrow that lived between his brows even in sleep, kiss the scar that marked his cheekbone. The wanting was so intense it scared her breathless. She was falling in love with him. Had maybe already fallen, somewhere between the first bowl of broth and the 100th small kindness. And love was the most dangerous thing she could possibly feel. Zara extracted herself from the bedroll carefully, trying not to wake him, and went to check their supplies. They were running low on several things: flour and salt and oil. Eventually, one of them would have to make the 2-day trip to the nearest settlement to trade for essentials. It should probably be Daniel, since he could pass as a normal traveler. Zara would be recognized as an orc immediately, and a slave if anyone looked close enough to see the collar. The thought of him leaving, even temporarily, made her chest tight. "You are up early," Daniel said from behind her, his voice rough with sleep. Zara did not turn around. "We need supplies. Someone should go to town soon. I know, I have been putting it off." He moved closer and she could feel the warmth of him at her back even though he did not touch her. "I do not want to leave you here alone. I can take care of myself." "I know you can. That does not mean I want to do it." His hand came to rest on her shoulder, light and careful. "Zara, look at me." She turned slowly, and the expression on his face stole her breath. There was no hiding from what she saw there, no pretending she had misread the situation. Daniel looked at her the way she had looked at him that morning, with want and fear and something deeper that neither of them had dared name. "I do not want to leave you," he said again, his voice low and rough. "Not for 2 days, not for 2 hours, not ever. And I know that is foolish and reckless and probably going to end badly, but I cannot keep pretending I do not feel it. Daniel." Her voice came out as a whisper. "You do not have to say anything. You do not have to feel the same way, I just needed you to know. Whatever you need from me, friendship or partnership or just someone to help you survive the winter, I will be that. But if you wanted more, if you felt even a fraction of what I feel for you, then I need you to know that I am here. I am not running anymore. Zara's hand came up to rest over his heart, feeling it pound against her palm. I feel it, she admitted, the words dragged from somewhere deep and secret. I have been trying not to, trying to be smart and careful, but I feel it. I think I have felt it since you gave me that first bowl of broth and did not ask for anything in return. Daniel exhaled, shaky and relieved, and rested his forehead against hers. We are going to have to figure out how this works. Neither of us is built for easy. No, she agreed. But maybe easy is overrated. He kissed her then, soft and careful, giving her every chance to pull away. Zara did not pull away. She kissed him back, her hands coming up to frame his face, and let herself fall into the feeling. He tasted like morning and possibility, and his arms came around her like a fortress, like a promise. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Daniel smiled at her with such open happiness that her heart hurt. We should probably still get those supplies, he said. Zara laughed, surprised the sound could still come out of her. Probably. But maybe not today. Maybe not today, she agreed and kissed him again. They spent the day in a bubble of new intimacy, learning the shape of each other in ways that went beyond survival. Daniel told her about his childhood, about learning to track with his father, about the sister who had been his best friend. Zara told him about her clan, about the mother who had taught her to fight, and the father who had taught her to think, about the brothers who had died protecting her during the raids. They worked on a new snare together, hands tangled as they shaped the wire, and Zara realized this was what partnership felt like. Not ownership, not obligation, just two people choosing to build something together. That night, curled up by the fire with Daniel's arms around her and his breath warm against her neck, Zara let herself imagine a future. Spring would come, and they could build a better shelter, maybe even a small cabin hidden deep in the mountains. They could hunt and trap and live quietly, away from the world that wanted to tear them apart. It would be hard and lonely sometimes, but they would have each other. The collar around her neck was a cold reminder that the world might not let them have even that. Daniel, she said into the darkness, the collar, I cannot keep it on forever. If we are going to have any kind of future, I need to get it off. He was silent for a moment, his arms tightening around her. I know, I have been thinking about it. There is a blacksmith in Thorndale, the settlement where I trade. He is discreet, does not ask questions. I think he would help. That is a risk. If anyone recognizes what I am, what the collar means, I will tell him you are my woman and the collar was from an abusive ex-husband. He does not need to know you are an orc. We will go at night, keep you cloaked and hidden. It will work. Zara wanted to argue, to point out all the ways the plan could go wrong, but the alternative was living with the collar forever, and she could not do that. Could not build a life, could not truly be free, with iron around her throat marking her as someone else's property. When? She asked. Tomorrow, we will leave at dawn, trade for the supplies we need and get the collar off. Then we come back here and we figure out the rest. It was not a perfect plan, but it was a plan, and it was more hope than Zara had allowed herself in years. Okay, Daniel echoed and kissed the top of her head. Try to sleep, love. Tomorrow is going to be a long day, love. The words settled into her chest like a coal from the fire, warm and bright. She fell asleep holding on to it, holding on to him, and dreamed of freedom. They left before dawn, taking the narrow mountain paths that Daniel knew better than anyone. He moved with the confidence of someone who had walked these trails 100 times, and Zara followed, her new boots gripping the icy stone. The cloak he had given her was thick enough to hide her green skin, and they had agreed she would keep the hood up at all times once they got close to town. The journey took most of the day, winding down from the high peaks into the foothills where humans had built their settlements. Thorndale was exactly what it sounded like, a collection of wooden buildings clustered around a crossroads, with thorny hedgerows marking property boundaries. Smoke rose from chimneys, and Zara could smell bread baking, livestock in pens, the particular scent of human habitation. It made her skin crawl. She had not been around humans in large numbers since her escape, and every instinct screamed at her to run. Daniel must have sensed her tension because he took her hand, lacing their fingers together. "Stay close to me. We will be quick." They waited until full dark before approaching the blacksmith shop, which sat on the edge of town away from most of the other buildings. Warm light spilled from the windows, and the sound of hammer on anvil rang out into the night. Daniel knocked twice, then once, then 3 times in quick succession, some kind of signal. The door opened to reveal a man nearly as wide as he was tall, with arms like tree trunks and a beard that reached his chest. He looked Daniel up and down, then glanced at Zara. "Oaks, been a while. Who is your friend?" "Someone who needs your discretion, Forge," Daniel said. "Can we come in?" Forge stepped aside, his expression unreadable. The smithy was hot and bright, the forge burning in the corner and tools hanging from every available surface. Forge shut the door behind them and threw the bolt, then turned to study them properly. "Let me guess," he said, his voice a low rumble. "That collar is not coming off with a regular key, and you need it gone without questions asked." Zara's hand flew to her throat. "How did you—" "I have been a smith for 30 years, girl. I know slave iron when I see it." His eyes, surprisingly kind in his craggy face, met hers. "And I know the look of someone who has been running. Your secret is safe with me." Daniel's hand found the small of Zara's back, steadying. "Can you remove it?" "Yes. It will take some time and it will not be pleasant. Those collars are made to punish tampering. But I can get it off without hurting her too badly." Forge moved to his workbench and started selecting tools. "Going to need her to sit still and trust me, though." "Can you do that?" Zara swallowed hard. The collar had been part of her for so long she almost could not imagine being without it. But the weight of it, the constant reminder of what she had been, was unbearable. "I can do it." "Good girl." Forge gestured to a stool near his workbench. "Sit here, keep your chin up and your shoulders back. This is going to feel strange, and there will be some heat from the tools, but I will be as careful as I can. Oaks, hold her hand. She is going to need it." The next hour was one of the longest of Zara's life. Forge worked with surprising delicacy for a man his size, probing the lock mechanism with picks and files, applying careful pressure in exactly the right places. The collar grew warm from his tools, uncomfortable but not quite painful, and Daniel held her hand the entire time, murmuring encouragement. "Almost there," Forge muttered, more to himself than to them. "Tricky bastard, this lock. They really did not want you getting out, did they?" "No," Zara said, her voice tight. "Well, too bad for them. I have never met a lock I could not beat." He adjusted his grip, applied pressure, and something clicked. The collar sprang open with a sound like a sigh, and suddenly Zara could breathe. She gasped, her hand flying to her throat, touching bare skin for the first time in 5 years. No iron, no weight, just her own skin, scarred and tender but free. Forge caught the collar as it fell and carried it to his forge. "You want to do the honors?" Zara stood on shaking legs and took the collar from his massive hands. It felt lighter now, smaller, just a piece of metal instead of a symbol of her imprisonment. She looked at Daniel, who nodded. She threw the collar into the forge and watched it glow red, then white, then begin to melt. The metal that had defined her for so long dripped and pooled, losing its shape, becoming nothing. Tears she had not been able to cry for years burned in her eyes. "Good riddance," Forge said with satisfaction. "Now, about payment, how much?" Daniel asked, already reaching for his coin purse. Forge waved him off. "Keep your coin. Just promise me you will take care of her, and that is payment enough." He fixed Daniel with a hard stare. "She is yours, Oaks. I am his," Zara said before Daniel could answer, "and he is mine." "Fair enough." Forge pulled a cloth-wrapped bundle from a shelf and handed it to Daniel. "Your usual supplies, and I threw in some extra flour and salt, no charge. Winter is coming hard this year, and you will need it." Daniel clasped the smith's forearm in thanks. "You are a good man, Forge." "I am a man who minds his own business and expects others to do the same." But his eyes were kind when he looked at Zara again. "You watch yourself, girl. World is not kind to orcs, even free ones. You have got something good here with Oaks. Hold on to it." "I will," Zara promised. They left the smithy as quietly as they had come, slipping back into the darkness. Zara kept touching her throat, marveling at the absence of weight, the freedom of movement. She felt lighter, like she could fly if she tried. Daniel pulled her into a shadowed alley between buildings and kissed her hard, his hands framing her face. "You are free," he said against her mouth. "You are free, Zara, and I am so damn proud of you." She kissed him back, pouring everything she could not say into the touch. When they finally broke apart, she rested her forehead against his. "Let us go home." Home. The word felt right, felt true. They made their way back up into the mountains, traveling through the night, and Zara had never felt so light. The winter that followed was hard but good. Snow piled deep around their cave, and there were days when they could not leave at all, when they huddled by the fire and told each other stories, and learned each other's bodies with the patience of people who had all the time in the world. Zara taught Daniel phrases in the orc tongue, words for snow and sky and beloved. Daniel taught her to read, painstakingly sounding out letters by firelight, until she could puzzle through the handful of books he had saved from his old life. They were happy. Against all odds, despite everything the world had done to try to break them separately, they were happy. Spring came slowly to the mountains, the snow melting in fits and starts, revealing a world washed clean. They stood outside the cave one morning, watching the sunrise paint the sky in shades of pink and gold, and Daniel said, "I want to build you something." "Build me what?" Zara asked, amused. "I do not know yet. Something that matters. Something that shows you what you mean to me." He turned to her, his expression serious. "You gave up everything for your freedom, Zara. I want to give you something back." "You already have," she protested. "You gave me safety and kindness and a home. What more could I possibly need?" But Daniel was already walking back into the cave with that determined look he got when he had set his mind on something. Zara followed, curious, and found him digging through his supplies. He pulled out a small cloth bundle she had never seen before, unwrapped it, and revealed a set of delicate metalworking tools. "I was an apprentice jeweler before the war," he said, answering her unspoken question. "My father's trade. I have not touched these in years, but I think I remember enough." "Daniel, you do not have to. I want to." He looked at her, his eyes intense. "Let me do this, please." Over the next 2 weeks, Daniel worked on his project in private, disappearing into a deeper part of the cave system for hours at a time. Zara respected his privacy, though her curiosity burned. She could hear the tap of metal on metal, the scratch of file on rough edges, the low muttering he did when he was concentrating hard on something. Finally, one evening as the sun was setting, he emerged with his hands cupped around something small. His expression was nervous and hopeful in equal measure. "Close your eyes," he said. Zara obeyed, her heart starting to pound. She felt him take her left hand, felt him slide something onto her ring finger. Metal, warm from his hands, settling into place. "Okay, look." She opened her eyes and looked down at her hand. The ring was beautiful and terrible and perfect. The metal was rough and dark, clearly recycled from something else, shaped into a simple band and polished to a soft gleam. But it was what had been etched into the band that made Zara's breath catch. Delicate, precise, worked into the metal with painstaking care, was a pattern of broken chains. "It is the collar," Daniel said quietly. "Or it was. I went back to Forge's smithy and asked him if he had kept the metal from when it melted. He had, and he let me take it. I wanted to take something that represented your bondage and turn it into something that represents your freedom. Your choice." He swallowed hard. "Your choice to be with me if that is what you want." Zara could not speak, could not breathe. The ring sat on her finger like it had always belonged there, the dark metal stark against her green skin. He had taken her shackles and made them beautiful. Had taken her pain and transformed it into a promise. "I know we cannot get married, not really," Daniel continued, the words tumbling out in a rush. "No one would recognize a marriage between a human and an orc, and we are both fugitives anyway. But I do not care about legal or official. I care about you, about us. So I am asking, Zara, will you be my wife? Will you build a life with me, here in these mountains or wherever else we end up? Will you let me spend the rest of my days trying to deserve you?" Zara's hand was shaking. The ring blurred as tears finally came, spilling down her cheeks hot and fast. 5 years of grief and pain and survival came pouring out, and underneath it all was joy so fierce it hurt. "Yes," she managed, her voice wrecked. "Yes, you ridiculous, wonderful man. Yes." Daniel let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob, and pulled her into his arms. They clung to each other like drowning people, and Zara thought about how far they had both come. From soldier to deserter to hermit to husband. From slave to fugitive to survivor to wife. They had shed so many skins to get here, had lost so much along the way, but they had found each other. And that was enough. They were married that night by the fire, with no witnesses but the stars and the mountains. They spoke their own vows, made their own promises, bound themselves to each other in ways that had nothing to do with law or religion, and everything to do with choice. Daniel produced a ring for himself. A simple silver band he said had been his father's, and Zara slipped it onto his finger with shaking hands. "I promise to stand with you," she said, the old words of her clan coming back to her. "In battle and in peace, in hunger and in plenty, until the last breath leaves my body and the world takes me back into the earth." "I promise to honor you," Daniel replied, his voice steady and sure. "To protect what we have built, to choose you every day for the rest of my life, and to love you beyond reason and sense." They sealed it with a kiss, and if lightning did not strike and the earth did not shake, well, it did not matter. They knew what they had sworn, and that was enough. The summer was a time of building. Daniel taught Zara carpentry, and together they constructed a small cabin in a hidden valley a few hours from their cave. It was rough work, their hands blistering and their muscles aching, but when it was done, they had something solid. A home. 4 walls and a roof, a proper hearth and windows with shutters, a door that locked from the inside. They moved their supplies carefully, turning the cave into a backup shelter and the cabin into their primary residence. Zara planted a garden behind the cabin, using seeds they had traded for in Thorndale. She did not have her mother's skill with growing things, but she learned through trial and error, and by late summer they had lettuce and beans and herbs. Daniel built snares and traps in a wide perimeter around their valley, ensuring they would have meat through the winter. They worked together to smoke and preserve food, to gather berries and nuts, to prepare for the cold months ahead. It was a hard life, but it was theirs. And every night, Zara would look at the ring on her finger and feel a peace she had never thought possible. They had been in the cabin for 3 months when the first traders passed through their valley. Daniel spotted them from a distance, 4 humans with pack horses, clearly lost. He and Zara debated leaving them to find their own way, but it was late in the day and a storm was rolling in. "We should at least point them in the right direction," Daniel said reluctantly. "They will freeze if they are caught in the high country tonight." Zara pulled her hood up, hiding her features. "Let me stay out of sight, just in case." Daniel nodded and went to intercept the traders while Zara watched from the tree line. She could not hear what was said, but she saw Daniel point toward the lower passes, saw the traders nod in thanks. They should have left then, should have taken the advice and moved on. But one of them was looking around the valley with too much interest, his eyes sharp and calculating. Zara's stomach sank. She knew that look, the look of someone who saw opportunity. "Nice setup you have here," the man said, loud enough that Zara could hear. "Pretty remote. Good for someone who does not want to be found." "I like my privacy," Daniel said carefully. "I bet. Say we are looking for an escaped slave. Orc woman, green skin, about this tall." He held his hand at Zara's height. "Big bounty on her head. You have not seen anyone like that around here, have you?" Zara's blood ran cold. The slavers, they had found her. "No," Daniel said flatly. "I have not seen anyone matching that description. Now, if you do not mind, I have work to do." The slaver smiled, and it was not a nice expression. "Course, we will get out of your hair, but if you do see anything, there is a reward. 500 gold crowns for her return alive. That is a lot of money for information." "I will keep that in mind," Daniel said, his voice icy. "Safe travels." The slavers left, but Zara knew they would be back. They had seen the cabin, seen the signs of habitation, and they were suspicious. It was only a matter of time before they came back with more men, more weapons, more determination. She emerged from the trees as soon as they were out of sight, and Daniel met her halfway. His face was grim. "We need to leave," she said. "No." His jaw was set in that stubborn line she had learned meant he would not be easily moved. "This is our home. We built it. I am not letting them drive us out. Daniel, they will come back, and when they do, they will not come asking questions. They will come with chains and weapons. Then we will be ready." He took her hands, his grip tight. "I am not running anymore, Zara. And I am sure as hell not letting them take you. We make a stand here." Zara wanted to argue, wanted to make him see sense, but she understood. He had been running for 3 years before she found him, running from his past and his guilt and his grief. He did not want to run anymore. And truthfully, neither did she. "Okay," she said. "We stand, but we need a plan." They spent the next 3 days preparing. Daniel had kept his sword from his army days, and he sharpened it until it gleamed. Zara made new traps, vicious things with sharpened stakes and trip wires, and placed them strategically around the cabin. They moved their most precious supplies back to the cave, ensuring that if the worst happened, they would have a fallback position. They barely slept, taking turns on watch, waiting for the inevitable return. The slavers came on the 4th night, and they did not come quietly. Zara heard them before she saw them, the sound of men and horses moving through the forest without care for stealth. She woke Daniel with a hand on his shoulder, and they moved into position. There were 6 of them this time, including the man from before. They surrounded the cabin, torches burning, weapons drawn. The leader stepped forward and hammered on the door. "We know she is in there, Oaks. Send out the orc and we will let you live." Daniel's answer was to throw open a shutter and loose an arrow. It took one of the slavers in the shoulder, spinning him around with a cry. The others scattered, taking cover, and chaos erupted. Zara went out the back, moving low and fast. She heard one of the slavers curse as he stepped on a trap, heard the snap of wood and his scream as the sharpened stakes punched through his boot. She came around the side of the cabin and found another one trying to set fire to the roof. Her knife, a gift from Daniel, found his kidney before he could light the torch. 2 down. 4 to go. Daniel was holding the front, his sword singing as he engaged 2 slavers at once. He had been a soldier, and it showed. His movements were efficient and brutal, no wasted motion. Every strike intended to disable or kill. But he was outnumbered, and the slavers were pressing hard. Zara roared, the sound echoing through the valley, and threw herself into the fray. She had no sword, just her knife and her rage and 5 years of survival instinct. She fought like the orc warrior her mother had trained her to be, fast and vicious, and utterly without mercy. The slavers had not expected resistance. They had thought they were hunting a helpless slave and a hermit, not 2 people who had already lost everything and refused to lose more. The leader, the one who had questioned Daniel, made the mistake of coming after Zara directly. He had a net in one hand and a club in the other, tools for capturing, not killing. He wanted her alive for the bounty. Zara did not give him the chance. She ducked under his first swing, came up inside his guard, and drove her knife up under his ribs. He made a wet, surprised sound and collapsed. The last slaver, seeing his companions dead or dying, broke and ran. Daniel let him go, too busy making sure none of the wounded could get up again. When the valley finally fell silent, it was the silence of the grave. Zara stood in the center of the carnage, breathing hard, blood on her hands and her clothes. The ring on her finger caught the torchlight, the broken chain pattern glinting. She had been forged in violence, had survived it, and now she had dealt it back to those who would take her freedom. She felt no guilt, only grim satisfaction. Daniel came to her, limping slightly from a wound on his leg but otherwise intact. He pulled her into his arms, heedless of the blood, and held her tight. "Are you hurt?" he asked, his hands running over her, checking for injuries. "No. You?" "Nothing serious." He looked at the bodies, at the destruction, and his face hardened. "The one who ran will bring more. We really do need to leave now." Zara nodded. They had won this battle, but the war was far from over. As long as there was a bounty on her head, as long as orcs were seen as property and not people, they would never be truly safe. But they would be together, and they would keep fighting. They gathered what they could carry, set fire to the cabin to deny the slavers any satisfaction, and disappeared into the mountains. They made their way back to the cave system that had been their first home, going deeper this time, finding passages that wound down into the earth away from the world above. It took them 3 days of travel to find what they were looking for. A massive cavern deep in the heart of the mountain, with a freshwater spring and a natural chimney that vented smoke to the surface far away. It was defensible, hidden, and large enough to build a life in. "What do you think?" Daniel asked, his voice echoing off the stone walls. Zara looked around the cavern, at the possibilities it represented, at the safety it offered. "I think we can make this work." And they did. Over the next year, they carved out a new home in the depths of the mountain. Daniel built furniture from wood they hauled down in pieces, and Zara worked on making the cave comfortable, fashioning curtains and rugs and storage. They established a new garden in a hidden valley 3 hours from their cave entrance, tending it in the early mornings when they were least likely to be seen. They traded with Forge, who kept their secret and provided them with the supplies they could not make themselves. It was not an easy life. But it was theirs, built on their own terms, and that made it precious. The bounty on Zara's head remained, but as months turned into years, the search died down. Escaped slaves were usually recaptured quickly or died in the wilderness. The slavers eventually concluded that Zara had met one fate or the other, and they stopped looking. Zara and Daniel built a life in the peace that followed. They learned every inch of their mountain, every game trail and water source and sheltered valley. They learned each other, too, the deep knowing that came from sharing hardship and joy in equal measure. They fought sometimes, passionate arguments that ended in passionate reconciliations. They laughed often, finding humor in small things, in the absurdities of their situation. They built a library of sorts, books acquired slowly through forge, and they read to each other by lamplight. And every night, Zara would touch the ring on her finger and remember what it represented. Her chains broken, her freedom chosen, her love given freely and returned in equal measure. 5 years after they had first met in a mountain cave, on the anniversary of the day Daniel had given her that first bowl of broth, Zara woke to find him sitting by their hearth with a thoughtful expression. "What are you thinking about?" she asked, moving to sit beside him. "The future," he said, taking her hand. "I want to know what you think about something." "What?" "There are rumors that the king is offering amnesty to deserters. Something about wanting experienced soldiers for the border guard, no questions asked about their past." He looked at her carefully. "If I took the amnesty, if I went back to being a legitimate citizen, I could buy land, register a legal homestead. We could live in the open, Zara. No more hiding." Zara's heart clenched. "They will never let me be legal. I am still an escaped slave, and I am still an orc." "You are my wife," Daniel said fiercely. "That makes you family, and family rights supersede slave law in the new territories. I checked with Forge. If I register you as my spouse before we leave the mountains, no one can touch you legally. The bounty becomes void." Zara stared at him, afraid to hope. "Are you sure?" "I am sure. The law was changed 2 years ago, part of the peace treaties with the orc clans in the north. The king wants to encourage integration, wants to show that humans and orcs can coexist. It is not perfect, and there will still be prejudice, but it would be legal. We could have a real life, Zara, not just survival. A real life." The idea was dizzying, to walk in the sun without fear, to build a home that no one would take from them, to be more than fugitives hiding in the dark. "Yes," she said, the word bursting out of her. "Yes, let us do it. Let us go live in the world." The process took months of careful planning and coordination. Daniel made several trips to Thorndale and beyond, meeting with officials and filing paperwork. Forge stood as witness to their marriage, swearing on official documents that he had seen them wed. Slowly, piece by piece, they built a legal identity for Zara that would protect her. When everything was finally in place, when the amnesty had been granted and the homestead claim filed, they packed up their mountain home for the last time. It was bittersweet, leaving the place that had kept them safe for so long. But the pull of the future was stronger than the comfort of the past. They emerged from the mountains in early spring, leading a pair of horses they had bought with their saved coin. The homestead was a day's ride from Thorndale, 100 acres of forest and field that had been abandoned during the wars. The cabin that stood on the property was dilapidated but structurally sound. It would take work to make it livable, but they had done it before. They could do it again. The first few months were an adjustment. Their nearest neighbors were a mile away, a farming family who was polite but distant. People in town stared at Zara, at her green skin and her tusks, but no one challenged their right to be there. Daniel made sure to introduce her as his wife at every opportunity, daring anyone to object. No one did. Or at least, no one did to their faces. They worked together to rebuild the homestead, repairing the cabin and clearing fields and planting crops. It was harder than living in the mountains in some ways, more exposed and more vulnerable to judgment. But it was also easier, having access to tools and supplies and trade goods. They could buy nails instead of making them, could trade for seed instead of foraging, could slowly, carefully, build something that resembled a normal life. Their second summer on the homestead, a traveling merchant came through selling household goods. Zara was in the garden when she heard the wagon, and she almost hid out of old instinct, but she was done hiding. She wiped the dirt from her hands and went to greet the merchant, head high. The merchant was an older woman with sharp eyes and a shrewd expression. She looked Zara up and down, taking in the green skin and the tusks and the ring on her finger, and smiled. "You must be Mrs. Oakes," she said. "I have heard about you." Zara tensed. "What have you heard?" "That there is an orc woman living on the old Henderson place with her human husband, and they keep to themselves but do good work. That is a fine garden you have got there. You looking to buy anything?" It was so normal, so blessedly, wonderfully normal that Zara felt tears prick her eyes. "Do you have seeds? I would like to expand the herb garden next season." "I have got seeds," the merchant said, and began unpacking her wares. Daniel found them an hour later, sitting on the porch and talking about the merits of different varieties of basil. He paid for the seeds and some fabric Zara had admired, and when the merchant left, she promised to come back through in the fall. "That went well," Daniel said, watching the wagon disappear down the road. Zara leaned against him, solid and warm and real. It did. They stood there in the afternoon sun, looking out over the land they were building into a home, and Zara thought about how far they had come. From slave and soldier to fugitives to hermits to homesteaders. From survival to safety to something that looked a lot like happiness. The ring on her finger caught the light, the broken chains etched into the metal a permanent reminder. She had been shackled once, had worn iron that marked her as property. But Daniel had taken that iron and made it beautiful, had taken her pain and turned it into a promise. She was free. She was loved. She was home. And that, Zara thought as Daniel's arm came around her waist, was more than she had ever dared to dream. Over the following years, their homestead flourished. The crops grew strong, and their reputation as skilled farmers spread through the region. Slowly, carefully, other people began to approach them for trade and advice. Daniel became known for his metalwork, a skill he had picked up from forge and refined in the quiet evenings. Zara's garden became legendary, her knowledge of herbs and healing plants sought after by the local healer. They were never fully accepted, not really. There were always those who looked at Zara with suspicion or disgust, who muttered about orcs and humans not mixing. But there were also those who saw past her skin and her tusks, who saw the woman who worked hard and treated others fairly, who saw the love between her and Daniel and recognized it for what it was. 7 years after they had first met in that mountain cave, on a crisp autumn morning with frost on the ground and smoke rising from their chimney, Zara stood in the doorway of their cabin and watched Daniel split wood in the yard. He had gray in his beard now and lines around his eyes, and he moved a little slower than he used to. But he was still strong, still steady, still hers. She touched the ring on her finger, a gesture that had become habit over the years, and marveled at how something so simple could hold so much meaning. The broken chains etched into the metal were wearing smooth now from years of wear, but she could still trace them with her fingertip, could still remember the day he had placed the ring on her finger and asked her to be his wife. She had been a slave then, broken and desperate and half dead from running. He had been a deserter, hiding from his past and his guilt. They had been two people who the world had chewed up and spat out, clinging to survival in the wilderness. Now they were farmers, homesteaders, partners in every sense of the word. They had built a life together out of nothing but determination and love, had turned pain into promise and survived when the world said they should not. Daniel looked up from his work and caught her watching him. He smiled, that particular smile that was hers and hers alone, and her heart did what it always did when he looked at her like that. It filled so full she thought it might burst. "What are you thinking about?" he called. "You," she called back. "Us. How far we have come." He set down the axe and crossed the yard to her, pulling her into his arms despite the cold and the dirt and the wood chips in his beard. "We have come pretty far, have we not?" "We have." She kissed him, soft and sweet, tasting like home. "And we have so much further to go." "Together," Daniel said, and it was not a question. "Together," Zara agreed, and meant it with every fiber of her being. They stood there in the doorway of the home they had built, holding each other against the cold, two people who had been broken by the world and had somehow found a way to heal. The ring on Zara's finger, forged from her own shackles, caught the morning light and gleamed. She had been owned once, had been property, a thing to be used and discarded. But Daniel had seen her as a person, had given her kindness when she expected cruelty, had offered her love when she thought she would never be worthy of it. He had taken the very symbol of her bondage and transformed it into the symbol of her freedom, her choice, her forever. And in doing so, he had given her more than just a ring. He had given her a future. The morning stretched before them, full of ordinary tasks and simple pleasures, wood to split and meals to cook and fields to tend. A life built from small moments and daily choices, from the decision to keep loving each other even when it was hard, even when the world said they should not. It was not a grand life, not one that would be written into legend or sung about in ballads. But it was theirs, earned through blood and tears and stubborn determination, and that made it perfect. Zara pulled back from the kiss, looking up into Daniel's face, seeing all the years they had shared written in the lines around his eyes, seeing the promise of all the years still to come reflected in his smile. "I love you," she said, the words as easy now as breathing. "I love you too," Daniel replied and kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. "My wife, my love, my Zara." The sun climbed higher, burning away the frost, and somewhere in the distance a bird called. The world kept turning, the seasons kept changing, and two people who had been lost found themselves in each other, again and again, every single day. And in the end, that was all that mattered.